Hi, this is Dave Hodges of the Common Sense Show, where we are freeing America one enslaved mind at a time. Well, I had Paul Martin on our last show on Sunday, December the 4th, and he dropped a couple of bombshells. Unfortunately, our time was really limited that night, so I asked Paul to come back so we could further expand on what it was he was revealing and get into more of the gory details. So, Paul, let's backtrack a little bit and let's set the stage on where we were on December 4th and then bring us forward to where we are now.
There's so much going on, I can't keep track of it. I think the breaking news is I had a long-time friend. He was part of the network, a helper, let's say, for the network that I started on. And he kind of snuck up on me last week, about days ago at work, and while I was outside, and dropped a bombshell on me. He said, "You know what's going on in Denver?" And I go, "Not really." He said, "Well, the Chechens are there." I went, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, the Chechens are in Denver." And he said, "They're robbing like crazy." He said, "Denver PD is not reporting any of it." He said, "They're very coordinated. They're very, they've got their own communication systems. They're in and out very fast," which tells me it's probably former Chechen military.
That is amazing. When you say their own communication systems, Paul, what specifically are you speaking about?
Well, they've probably got their own encrypted system where nobody can hear.
Okay. Any idea?
Which tell me.
Go ahead.
Which tells me they're military, because with the way they're moving, what they're doing, how they're doing it, their own encrypted systems and stuff. I mean, the Russian mafia in Denver for, I don't know, a couple of decades. You know, when I was dancing, when I was the most dangerous right-wing extremist in Colorado back in 94, 95. I danced with the FBI for about 13 years. And, if you mention the Russian mob sitting at the table with a bunch of FBI agents, you know, they were reaching for diapers. They were scared to death of them, which rightly so. But with the Chechens showing up, I mean, we're turning into a hodgepodge of all kinds of stuff in Colorado. You know, we've talked, Dave, you and I've talked about it before, 2 or 3 times probably, about, you know, the Russians are here. We've got Mongolians here. We've got the Gurkhas here. We've got former Turkish prisoners with barcodes on the left side of their necks.
And Paul, I want to emphasize something here too. For the listening audience that may not have heard our previous broadcast together, you have access to firsthand eyewitness accounts of these sightings of these foreign troops, correct?
Oh, many of them, up to Larimer County deputies.
Yeah, Larimer County, for the people who may not know, is the county which encapsulates Fort Collins, and I call Larimer County basically the Agenda 21 capital of the world. In fact, I like to call them the People's Republic of Larimer County. Another story for another day, but that's the area that we're speaking about. And Paul, you know, I have pictures of Russian soldiers at Fort Carson in Colorado Springs, training with American soldiers. And as you know, I've produced documents that show the FEMA bilateral agreement in 2011 with the Russian Foreign Ministry. And as a consequence of that, the first 15,000 Russian troops came into the country. Notice my choice of words, first 15,000. So, Paul, a lot of people don't want to believe this, but it's not conspiracy theory. This is conspiracy fact, or should I say now the new buzzword? It's not fake news, it's real news.
Oh, absolutely. They shoot at the range where I shoot. Good for the listeners that may not have heard some previous podcasts. I had a good friend of mine who was a military armorer, and him and his buddies were shooting at the range where I shoot, and he called me, and he'd walk back out in the parking lot, got in his truck, and he said, "There's Russians shooting at our range." He said, "I'll call you back." And so it was a couple hours, and he called me back, and when he called me back, he said, "I've never seen anybody shoot a hand." Now, this guy's military. He's an armor, but he's he's a very good shot. He said, "I've never seen anybody shoot a handgun like this." And so he talked to him. He said, "You guys shoot really good. I've never seen anybody shoot like that. Are you guys in the military?" And the older handler, and I'll give you another story on that. The handler said, "No, we're mechanical engineers." And what?
Yeah, they were shooting at the blueprints. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and what's generally in Colorado, you'll see 3 or 4 or 5, maybe 6 young, very well built Russian young men, and they'll have an older handler. The Spetsnaz run by themselves. They don't have a handler. I had a friend up at Estes Park last year that had stopped by the subway there in Estes with him and his wife, and there was 5 really well-built young men, short haircuts. They were speaking English, and so they were speaking Russian, and they got up to the young lady to order their sandwiches, and they broke into perfect Nebraska English. And for the audience that doesn't understand this, when this whole thing started with Fort Carson, the first thing I did was I called Steve Quayle, called Hawk, called John Moore, and I said, these aren't the real numbers. And it was about 36 hours, and John Moore called me back, and he said, "Paul, this is directly from Langley.
Yeah.
There's 5 2,500-man teams advanced to the 5 largest bases in the United States." And,
well, I've been told that estimate is really low, Paul.
Well, this was years ago. It's a couple of years ago. So
fair enough.
Oh, absolutely. And so I was asking John. I said, "How do these guys go from a very Slavic, strong language to a perfect Johnny Carson, Nebraska English?" And he goes, "I don't know, but I'll find out." It was about a day later, and he called me and he said, "I talked to a language professor at the University of Missouri, and he said, John, the only way you can do this is you have to start them at 4 or 5 years old. So these Spetsnaz troops have been groomed from almost birth, and we got a lot of them out here. I mean, they're in Montana, they're Smoky Mountains. I mean, they're just everywhere. But the thing that people have to know is that these guys' modus operandi is political assassination and explosions. And when I was talking to John, when this whole ball got rolling after the deal at Fort Carson, I was talking to John Moore, and he said, Paul, all it takes is about 5 or 6, maybe 7, and they can shut down Denver overnight. They can blow up power stations. They can blow up a bridge or 2. They can wreak a lot of havoc in just 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah, he's told me the same story on my show. John nails it when it comes to this, and he talks about the fact that he was talking to me about Phoenix, which the metropolitan area is about 4 million people. He said 3 grids will take you down, and he said, and they can do it with an 8-man team, and he said, and they can do it in a matter of minutes. So it's amazing that we let them in here. Of course, we know that Obama's the great traitor in chief, and he allowed this to happen with this FEMA bilateral agreement in 2011. When we look at the totality of this, well, let me back up here. I'm going to share with you a story, and I don't know if I've told you this, Paul. Last week, I got an email communication from someone who lives on the Front Range area in Denver, and they were traveling from Fort Collins to Denver, and they were trailing a military convoy, and then they got up and drove it alongside of them. Trucks that they said were tremendously large and high off the ground, and when they could see in, they were seeing troops that were in dark uniforms, and they had no idea whether they were American or something else. And I wrote back and I said, this is interesting. By the way, they exited at 120th Avenue, which is the North Glen area, which is for the listening audience, a northern suburb of Denver. And there's nothing military there. That's the thing that struck me. But I wrote back to them and I said, this is interesting information, but we live in a digital age. Do you have photos? And they said no. But interestingly enough, I heard from the same couple again a few days later, and they did have photos. Now I'm having trouble extrapolating them from the email. I'm getting someone to work on that for me tomorrow, and I'm going to be publishing those. That there is heavy troop movement on I-25. What do you know about that, Paul?
Well, there has been for some time. I mean, we've got white buses with smoked out windows traveling I-25, going north and south. Of course, I'm in northern Colorado, and for the last year, they've been, and for such a small little bitty town as LaPorte, Colorado, I mean, it's kind of like it's just a weird zone for all this. But 287 runs down from Laramie and runs down through to Fort Collins and exits off there at LaPorte. But the last time we talked, we had a lot of white Humvees and some woodland camo Humvees pulling generators.
Oh,
there.
Yes. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, it's this has been going on for some time. This isn't just like this week, but over the last 3 or 4 months, we've seen a lot of white Humvees and woodland camo Humvees carrying pulling generators, and we've also seen, as we talked on the last time we talked, of a lot of Homeland Security vehicles carrying multiple cans of fuel in their vehicles. So we're the Bermuda Triangle out here for weirdness for all of this military stuff, Dave.
Well, I don't think that's the Bermuda Triangle for weirdness, Paul. I think you gave us something very specific to focus on. If you're looking at the fact that they're carrying fuel, that means that they're planning on doing one of two things: carrying on a sustained military operation where they can't count on resupply of fuel, which you would expect in commando kind of activities. And since you're seeing Spetsnaz, Russian commandos, in your area, that wouldn't be surprising. But there's something else that's even more disturbing to me, Paul, is that if these trucks were EMP proofed, in other words, they're geared to have older technology and not all the onboard computer stuff that would get fried by an EMP, that makes sense to me too. Do they think maybe an EMP attack is coming and this is their way to circumvent it, keep their fuel portable so they can stay on the road because they know that their vehicles will survive the EMP so long as they have gasoline to travel?
I mean, very well could be. I mean, we've talked about on previous programs the conversation I had with the IT tech that worked for the U.S. Army was very upset about that the grid is all Chinese software, and a couple of keystrokes and the grid goes down. So, which is an easy fix for them. I mean, if you look at all things that's going on politically with Trump, Yellen's not one of Trump's favorite people, so we could wind up. I mean, she could pull the plug on the economy, and which is looking really good because they want to drop a hammer on Trump. But I mean, I've been talking about it for 5 years. There's a couple of things that are easy fixes for them: shut down the grid, release a bioweapon.
Well, interesting.
The
you
mainstream
mentioned
media has. Well, I'm just saying the media, the mouthpiece for the New World Order, the global elite, is gone. It's totally gone.
Are you talking about
Look
the
at
mainstream?
Brexit.
You're talking about the mainstream
Yeah,
media?
the mainstream. Yeah, they're toast. Everybody around the world's know it. I mean, you look at the last votes in Italy. You look at the Brexit. You look at the Trump phenomenon. The Merkel, the ropes. I mean, Merkel's the last one standing. There's only one of the global elite in the last year that is still. That's Merkel. So, I mean, you look at the fact that we're at the end of a credit cycle. We're at the end of a 600-year global elite cycle. They're just not going to walk. Well, gee, they beat us.
No, I've been saying that all along too. In fact, they've got their hooks into our Congress now. I reported on a story on the evening of December the 6th in a podcast in which I've come across information along simultaneously with Gary Franchi of Next News Network, and we're both finding the same thing. Paul the Rat Ryan has already organized a coalition against Trump to block his planned taxation for corporations that shut down, cost American jobs, relocate their factories overseas, and bring their products back in. And Ryan's trying to block the taxation on the corporations sending their products back in. And this is really the hallmark of Trump's campaign. And, you know, the corporations grease the politicians with massive amounts of campaign donations and Lord knows what else. And now it looks like there's going to be gridlock in the Congress. And you remember, Paul, I called this. I said, if Trump is elected, we'll have gridlock. And here it is.
Well, we'll have mass gridlock. I mean, this, you know, I've talked about it before. This guy's taking on the globe. I mean, what Jack Kennedy did is kindergarten stuff compared to what Trump's doing. And I do not think that they're just going to walk away and head to the bar and have a scotch and say, well, we got beat. They're not going to do that. These people are sick. They're psychotic. They're control freaks. They're pedophiles. They're Luciferians. Or a whole lot of other things. And so, I mean, we're in some very interesting times. Time 10,000.
Yeah, and I want to mention something here too, and then I want to return back to the Jetsons in Denver because I have some thoughts on that. Paul, we look at the mainstream media now. The Washington Post came out yesterday, and they went after retired General Michael Flynn, who is Trump's nominee for National Security Advisor, and I think he's an excellent choice, outstanding choice by Donald Trump. And now what did the Washington Post do? They came out and accused Flynn of starting the Pizzagate rumors and said it's all fake news and Flynn's to blame. I mean,
yep.
These stories, Paul, that are coming out of their mouths are not even believable.
Well, no, but the people don't believe them. I mean, look at their number. Look at their subscribers. It's in the toilet.
Yeah, I've been saying all along that the only thing that the New York Times and Washington Post is good for is use the paper to housebreak your puppy. It's certainly not news. It's just all the liberal ideologies fit to print.
Yeah, well, it's been that way for years. I mean, the independent media has been reporting on that for 20 years.
Yeah, that's true.
But now it's in the open, and that makes them that much more dangerous.
Well,
and we don't have all these foreign troops here. We don't have Mongolians and Russians and Nepalese and all these other people, and they're not just here. They're in Montana. You reported they're in the Great Smoky Mountains and God knows where. And the UN vehicles that have been spotted around the country, and we talked about my source talking about the going to the army bases in the western United States, prepping them for what do we call it? Urban warfare.
Yes, civil unrest leading to urban warfare. Yeah, I've got the same thing. And see, I think this is what we're seeing with this military convoy reported on by this married couple as they travel the I-25 corridor between Fort Collins and Denver, which is about an hour's trip in good weather. And, I mean, there's a reason why they're bringing in massive amounts of Well, it wasn't armor, but it was troop transport and troops and support vehicles, and why they're bringing them in and then depositing them off of 120th Avenue. I mean, one direction you go, you're in Thornton. Another direction you go, you're in North Glen. And Paul, there's nothing up there of military value. I'm from Denver. I know that area. There's nothing up there of military value. So they're hiding these things somewhere for future use. And we've talked about this. When the poop hits the fan, tell the audience what the plan is for continuity of government to deal with the cities.
Well, number one, my East Coast source said they're not going to use the term martial law; they use the term continuity of government.
Sure.
My source said that what they're going to do is they're going to ring the cities off, nobody in, nobody out. Let them. There's enough weapons out there; they can grind it out and shoot each other, and they're going to wait 6 months. John Moore's source. He actually sent me a snail mail on it. He didn't tell me on the phone. But he had a high, I'll put it this way, high-ranking officer out of Joint Special Operations out of Florida. They told him exactly the same thing. 6 months, ring the cities off, and wait. And we talked about on the last program that it was just here recently that 4 of the very largest U.S. Army transport vehicles were seen going south of Pueblo with massive compressed concertina wire. 4 of them. They were running about a mile apart.
What does that mean?
Do you remember Fallujah when they ringed off Fallujah? All they got to do is start sticking poles in the ground, hook up on one end of these trucks, and just start driving. And just Fallujah, they ringed Fallujah off in a day, and there was one entrance in and one entrance out. So I mean, we've seen 4 of these, and these are very, very tall tractor trailer rigs, and the compressed concertina wire on. It had to have been 45 or 50-foot trailers, and there was 4 of them, and it was compressed. And that's just Colorado. Where else could they be?
Well, let's talk about the convoy moving into Denver and exiting at 120th Avenue. That's certainly not the end of civilization as far as the Denver metro area. But, Paul, wouldn't you agree with me that would be an ideal checkpoint, a cutoff point, chokehold, to seal off the northern end of Denver?
Oh, absolutely. Because all you got north of that is Littleton, and
I think you mean Broomfield.
I mean Broomfield.
Yeah.
And
mm-hmm.
after that, it's over.
Yeah, and Broomfield's more of a bedroom community, isolated, semi-rural, and it's more on the way to Boulder. But when you're talking that I-25 corridor along the Front Range, 120th Avenue is always considered to be the end of civilization for Denver. And even though it's expanded beyond that, there's not a whole lot beyond that in terms of logistical value. And the fact that you said Pueblo is interesting, too. The question I have, was the convoy Pueblo, was it sighted north or south of Pueblo?
It was south of Pueblo going south, which makes me think it's probably going to what's the base, the large base down there. I'm having a brain fart. Pinyon Canyon, huge, massive.
Oh boy, that's interesting. See, let's lay out the map for people who aren't visualizing this right now. When you look at the Front Range in Denver, you're looking at coming up from the New Mexico border. You travel for 2 hours, you'll reach Pueblo, town of about 140,000 people. And that begins what we call the Front Range, which is continual civilization with sparse developments in some places between Pueblo and Fort Collins. And it goes Pueblo, and then a 35-minute drive to the north is the beginning of Colorado Springs. And then from there, continuing the I-25 corridor, you reach Castle Rock, Douglas County area, which is a southernmost suburb of Denver. And then, of course, the Denver metro area, traveling north on I-25. Then you reach that 120th Avenue about, I'd say in good traffic, 30 minutes after you enter the city. And then, of course, it's a straight shot from 120th Avenue to Fort Collins, and that's about a 55-minute drive. I know, I've made it enough times. So this is an entire Front Range area. Now let me lay this out, Paul. You've got troops on one end of Denver to shut that city down. You've also got troops up in your area to shut down anything north of Fort Collins, which is part of the Front Range. And then going all the way down to the southernmost end of the Front Range, Pueblo, they're going to shut that off. In other words, they're going to cordon off that whole corridor. That's how I look at this.
Well, I do too, and I mean we've had lots of chopper flights here. We've had 2 Russian helos here for 2 years. About 6 months ago, they were doing once you go into LaPorte and then you turn right and it takes you to Laramie, Wyoming. There's a wedge there, and they were doing light out touch and goes. We've got a MiG here. I don't know where they've got it stored, but last year they were doing route mapping. They were flying back and forth in kind of a grid thing across I-25 by Loveland, Colorado. And I mean, with the fact that Denver's the new capital. If something happens, or when it happens, I mean, like I said, this is the Bermuda Triangle for weirdness.
This is incredible what we're laying out here. And people who are from Colorado hearing this broadcast will completely 100% agree with us, folks. We are 100% on the mark with our analysis of the geography, how this lays out, and the concentration of troop movements that we're seeing. We're talking about the cordoning off of an entire region called the Front Range in Denver. So if you're from New York City, you may not be familiar with this area, but Denver is not just a confined city with a metropolitan area. We have for a very long time looked at this as a mega region developing, much like you see in Southern California, starting near the border in southern San Diego and going north, all the way north to Los Angeles and even further up to like San Luis Obispo. And so this is what we're looking at here. And I got to believe if they're going to cordon off this area and stop traffic and keep people in their place with key checkpoints in each of these metropolitan areas, Paul, they're basically going to not only shut off the region, but they're going to shut off segments within the region. And I've read the continuity of government plans, and this just fits precisely with what they're talking about. But I want to go back to the Chechens for a second in Denver. I want to try to see if we can extrapolate a little more detail. Any idea what part of Denver they're in terms of the crimes they're committing, and what kind of crimes are the Chechens committing in Denver?
My friend didn't say. He's good friends with a Denver PD officer, and all he said was they're very well orchestrated. They have their own communication systems. Whatever they hit, they're in and out, and nobody's reporting on it. Nobody in the press, in Denver press, and Denver PD's not releasing anything.
Yeah, that's really interesting to me. Let me tell you what I've learned. I've made some phone calls, Paul, since you told me about this, and I've got a multitude of contacts in the Denver area since I spent my childhood all the way up to my early adulthood there. And one of the things that I have discovered is I laid out the Chechens. And what people did not know that I've talked to, Chechens, they were thinking just organized criminals have moved into Denver, and they were suspecting the Russian mafia. Now, I've got to be careful because I don't want to burn a source here. I've got 2 sources, and I don't want to burn them. They're both law enforcement. And they both know about the increase in criminal activity. And it's not that these crimes are robbing banks and carjackings and doing drug deals. That's not what they're doing. They're doing industrial theft. They're grabbing major electrical cable and other things that you would need to construct portable power supplies. And Paul, I'd have to see you in person because I can't say this over electronic communication, but my one source on this, of the two sources, is impeachable. And actually, this person goes back to my childhood in terms of affiliation. Confidence call on this is 100%. Same source that gave me the plans, 8, 9 years ago, to do the H1N1 DUI style roadblocks to forcibly vaccinate people or to take them to camps. That was on the books. They were going to do that. DHS was training with Colorado law enforcement to do that. We exposed it. It spread like wildfire, and we turned it back. Now, the Chetsons, what I've been told, Paul, and I know you know Denver pretty well, we're talking the Auraria area in Denver, and going west, and that's a highly industrialized area crossing the Platte River, not too far south from where the Denver Broncos play at Sports Authority Field, and going up to Federal Boulevard and a little farther west to Sheridan Boulevard along what they call the I-70 corridor. And I find it interesting that they're there because that's right in the vicinity where I-70 intersects with I-25, and that would be a key choke point to cut off a city. And that's where the Chetsons are. Now, here's my question after this long-winded explanation. Paul, do you have any indication that the Chetsons have somehow patched things up with Putin and they're actually doing the bidding of the Russian military?
It could be. I don't know. But, what you found out's very interesting because, you get over in the area you were talking about and you've got you've got I-70, you've got I-25, 225 that cuts back and goes to Colorado Springs. And, you cut that off and that whole place shuts down.
Yeah, but
if
this is crazy.
If they're doing that, what your source was talking about, they could be taking demolitions. They could be taking TNT, Semtex, or anything else. You only have to blow about 4 overpasses from South Denver to North Denver to East Denver and West Denver to shut that whole place down. And it doesn't take a whole lot of Semtex to do that.
That was the fear of the one person I spoke with as well, is that they had enough material from the theft Lissy had we're also talking about cell phone extractions, and they were talking about IEDs, car bombs and so forth, but he said it went way beyond that. He said they're breaking into factories along the Platte River between there and Federal Boulevard, which is just west of downtown Denver. And that's a heavy industrialized area. And they're grabbing this huge electric cable, the kind they string to go power plant to electrical grid supply. And I asked him, I said, what do you think it is? And he said, Dave, we looked at this. And he said, we talked about it in a meeting and we were told within an inch of our lives, you better head and say anything. But we speculated that they were going to build their own encampments and have their own power supply so they could have their encampments from which to launch their operations. And I was like, holy crap, because Paul, let's go back to what we're talking about earlier. We're going to connect a dot here. Your vehicles that are carrying portable gasoline, which is suggestive of the fact that they want to go beyond an EMP attack, but they want to stay mobile, because EMP attack occurs, you're not getting gas out of the pumps that are basically ATM operated and need electricity to pump gas. So they would need to carry their pumps. And now we're seeing Chetson basically grabbing enough supplies to build their own portable small city power supply. Do you see the dot connecting there, Paul?
Absolutely.
So we're looking at being carved up like the proverbial Thanksgiving turkey. And these Chetsons are brutal. And where have people heard of Chetson before? The Boston Marathon bombing.
Yep.
Perhaps it was a beta test that went bad. Pretty interesting stuff.
Wow. With the, I mean, encapsulating what everything we've done here and talked about is we could, I don't know if it should be national, it could be regional, of a grid down. I mean, there's 4 different sections of grid. Texas has their own grid, but I mean, it wouldn't take too terribly much, Dave, just to bring down the Western grid.
No, not at all. And in fact, let's harken back to what I wrote back in 2013, and I'm sure you'll remember this, Paul. I became incensed and outraged when Obama allowed the Russians and the Chinese to participate in what they called Grid X2. And Grid X2 was the simulated takedown of the grid of the United States, either through a cyber attack or an EMP attack. And I was furious because we were letting the Russians and Chinese observe how the grid could come down so they could imitate it. And this was all courtesy of Obama. I think they were rehearsing for what's about ready to happen.
Well, absolutely. And, I've said it 1,000 times over the last 5 or 6 years. The grid down is such an easy fix for them. You and I have talked about extensively bioweapons, which are extremely cheap to make. You can go through all the major airports with an aerolyzer. But I mean, with the New World Order, with the global elite in Western Europe, here in the United States on the ropes, I don't count anything out right now, Dave.
Well, this is what I wanted to get into in more depth when you appeared on the Common Sense Show on December the 4th. We had about 21 minutes of live air. And this wasn't nearly enough time to develop this, but we're still not done with this. Because what I want to also mention here, Paul, is that if the military should jump ranks and not go along with the takedown of the United States, which I think is going to coincide with Obama taking office, Trump taking office. When we look at troops in northern Colorado, they're just not military troops. They're anti-guerrilla troops. And let me connect another dot here. In Texas, and we've talked about this ad nauseum, Paul, and I've mentioned it ad nauseum on my website, the UWEX 16 drill is practicing at 4 military bases in Texas for American rogue units, military units gone rogue, that they are defecting to support the people, and they're fighting guerrilla tactics. We've got the BizOp job ads to show. I published them on the Common Sense Show, and they're practicing for the New World Order troops, be they American loyalists that stay with the New World Order takeover, or be they foreign operatives combining together under the UN flag. They plan on fighting a guerrilla war against American insurgent forces that have basically deserted because they see the country's been taken over. Now, Paul, with that long-winded explanation, let's go up north and talk about the Gurkhas. What specialty do the Gurkhas have with regard to combat?
Well, they take out any kind of terrorist organization. I mean, the British have been using them for a couple 100 years. I mean, they're very they're a lot like the Mongolians, which is 60% of the Russian army. They're very resilient, they're very brutal, can live in unbelievable extremes, and they're there to take out any kind of guerrilla action.
Exactly. So when we look at the Gurkhas in northern Colorado, and we look at both American military units and foreign troops at these 4 bases in Texas for UX-16, we're seeing the same strategy being employed. And as a consequence here, we're looking at basically any military that would go rogue is going to be dealt with. And I got something for you on Pinyon Canyon, too. A lot of the recruits, they're new recruits oftentimes at Fort Carson, they come into the military 6 months later, they're cannon fodder in Afghanistan, and they're huge contingents, the largest, I understand, infantry units that the United States possesses. But it's interesting because at Fort Carson, they've moved some of their heavy armor with some of their more elite troops to Pinyon Canyon, which is about 90 minutes to 2 hours away, by car from Fort Carson. And let me suggest to you, Paul, what I have been told, and I think it's true, and this came from my RSOF source. They're removing the troops from the base that they know they can trust, because when the poop hits the fan, they're not sure how the rank-and-file soldiers that may only be 8-9 months removed from civilian life are going to react. Isn't that interesting?
Wow.
That came from RSOF. No kidding. And I've talked to people in Pinyon Canyon and as far east towards Lamar to Otero Community College, where I actually spoke with the vice president of that college many times, and they were concerned because they had heavy armor running through the prairie ranch land of Pinyon Canyon, and the ranchers and farmers there were beside themselves because this heavy armor was destroying their land, and they were losing their ability to maintain a livelihood on this. And the military took tremendous public heat for doing this. This group reached out to me after I had successfully led a group here in Arizona, including myself, to defeat the New World Order in kicking 300 of my neighbors, including myself, off their land to build a Canamex highway for the Central American Free Trade Agreement. And they read about that, and they reached out to me and said, could you help us? Can you give us some tips on what you did that was successful? That's how I found out about this, Paul. But then I have also found out that these are the elite crack troops that the New World Order, and actually it's Northcom, that the elite New World Order, they're going to use these troops to fight against American troops should they go rogue. And they've got the heavy mechanized in Pinyon Canyon, and the base itself has largely been stripped of most of its mechanized military equipment, and so you'll have soldiers with M16s fighting against tanks should they not go along with the New World Order.
Well, for those of you in the audience from an old Marine Corps tanker, all you got to have is a really good heavy crowbar. There's sprockets at the rear of a tank where the tracks are, and all you got to do is put a really nice heavy piece of steel in there, and that'll take that track right off that back sprocket.
Yeah,
and then you've got a pillbox.
Yes, things are going to get really dicey. And, Colorado is prime targeting for the New World Order. As you know, the CIA and to some degree the NSA and a lot of the other alphabet soup agencies have moved into underground facilities associated with Denver International Airport and on this vast tunnel system that connects DIA to Cheyenne Mountain and to places west, like 29 Palms, for example. And they're setting up it is continuity of government, Paul, as you've said many times, but this is the new government. In other words, Washington, D.C. is going to be fried. It's going to be gone. And they're fully intent on transferring. Now, Paul, I don't think it's there any longer, but I believe in predictive programming, and I write about it quite a bit on thecommonsenseshow.com. But what I really find interesting was what was at the mural outside baggage claim at Denver International Airport for about 15 years. And I think you know what I'm talking about. The man in the Russian coat carrying a huge sword, AK-47 shouldered strap on his shoulder, and waves, a gas mask, and waves of immigrants that were trying to escape, most of them women and children. And that was, I think they've taken that down because too many people like us wrote about it, put the pictures up on the internet. And I think that they've decided, yeah, might want to keep this a little quiet. But I think it was predictive programming. In fact, Jesse Ventura covered an aspect of the Denver International Airport when he had the plaque that was dedicated to the opening of the airport, and it said the New World Commission. Do you remember that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is in my former backyard. I grew up probably about 25 minutes from there in Aurora, Colorado, and really interesting to see these developments there. Paul, we've got a lot of dots on the board, and we've done a little connecting, but I have a feeling between now and the end of the year, and also going into the new year, before the inauguration, I think we're going to see a lot more, because let me tell you what my gut tells me, and I had a source tell me he feels the same way without proof. What's going on in Colorado, this is the command and control for the ISIS attacks, and with supporting groups like MS-13 and so forth, that is going to take place across the United States on a single day. I know it's coming. I've been told it's coming. A lot of people have confirmed it's coming. I wrote an article today on it called Black Friday. No, not the shopping day after Thanksgiving, but the Black Friday of the inauguration of Donald Trump. And Paul, I'm going to leave you with this thought here. The TV show Designated Survivor, anyone who's not watching it needs to watch it. Why? Because in the movie, they have the TV show, they have a serious attack from terrorists, and they kill the entire government except for 3 people.
Yeah, it's at the top of my website. Yeah, I read it. I believe it. I mean, look at the movie Terminator.
Yes.
And look what's going on with robotics right now. I mean, there's no tell. I mean, the Russians have got amazing technology right now. No telling what the Americans, what we've got with technology right now that we can't even see or even know about. But, the bottom line in all of this is for the people to get prepared, have fuel, have water, have medicine, medical kits, lots of food, connect with like-minded neighbors that can help support you, and you can help support them. Same thing I've been doing here for the last, 4 years. But
yeah.
I think, Dave, we're going to go to bed one night, and I think we're going to wake up in a completely, utterly different world.
I think that date is January the 20th. I resisted those claims early on when people were saying it, but I'm beginning to see the dots connect on this, and I think that is the target. That's the new Black Friday. And Paul, you mentioned storable food. Let me get in a unashamed promotion here. We're brought to you by Numana Foods. And why do I associate with Numana? Because they're honest, their prices are low, their quality is high. These people are the real deal. They deliver what they promise, and they stand behind their products. And if you're not ready in terms of what Paul just mentioned, let me direct you to Numana for a good product choice. Go to numana.com/Hodges, and for a brief time, you're going to see that we have a 5% off sale using the coupon code Hodges, NOV5. Also have a stocking stuffer that we're going to play a short video here at the end of this transmission. It has to do with a heavy-duty flashlight, and if the grid goes down, this will be a necessary part of everybody's survival plan and equipment. Paul, this has been fascinating. I know we're not done with this topic. We're going to basically have to come back and do more on this. But, Paul, we got to scoot. I got 10 seconds to get to network, so thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for being on. Yeah, we're not finished yet. It's gonna get more interesting.
Amen, my friend. Well, this is Paul Martin from revolutionradio.org. Tune him in. They're right on the web, and he's got the best articles out there. Dave Hodges signing off for the Common Sense Show. We'll see you back here again real soon.
With the rise of domestic terrorism and stricter gun laws to contend with, Americans are searching for better ways to be prepared for any situation. How are they doing that? Simply put, a flashlight. And not just any flashlight, the TC1200 military-grade flashlight from OneTac.com. It has just been released to the public for the first time and is already selling out, and here is why. Powered by the most advanced Cree LED technology in marketing today, makes the TC1200 the most powerful single LED flashlight for its size. It's amazingly bright with up to 1200 lumens, has a lamp life of 100,000 hours, and is made from military-grade aluminum for extra durability. It is compact and lightweight, which makes it perfect for taking with you anywhere you go. At 75% the regular price and free shipping, the OneTac TC1200 is the only high-powered flashlight you will ever need in your arsenal. Visit OneTac.com today before they're out of stock. OneTac. Power, strength, and protection.